So this is going to be our last part of the session today. Can I just get a show of hands for those who would like us to try and continue doing this sort of stuff? Okay, that's fairly unanimous.
Auckland Council would like the same presentation done for planners perhaps. I'll pass that on.
I reckon local board would like the same presentation.
Okay, well we're getting quite popular, that's good.
We're going to get so much chocolate.
I guess one of the take-homes out of what Mel's has just talked to us about though is that we all have that chance in the very near future to have our say, and I really would encourage you all to have a say. Even if it doesn't make a difference, you can all stand up with your hand on your heart and say, I put a submission in, I did my best to try and make a change, like Stacey did. Stacey put his money where his mouth was, and he tried to make change. Even though
what's happened to him since though.
I know.
I don't want to speak too loud about you.
So I guess from a collective perspective, we certainly would, want to try and support Mel's and the tree counts and what they're doing. NZR will certainly put the information that we've seen today up on our website, which will be available, and I encourage you to get in touch with others and obviously pass that on. So the next part will be, this is something that where we need to go as an industry. Sustainability, when I first started in the industry over 25 years ago, wasn't even a word. It wasn't something that arborists even thought about.
Nor was urban forest.
Nor was urban forest. In New Zealand, in other countries, it was certainly well known. It's been a term around since the early 70s. So. But we have Jess Hiscox from Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, who is the sustainability manager, and Rob Small, who has been, to be fair, Rob's been in this industry an awful lot longer than probably all of us. I would say you probably have been in the industry longer than all of us, Rob. 45 years of experience. So Rob's been a parks manager, was with the ARC, and has a fantastic career, and has certainly given a lot to the industry in terms of landscape architecture, open space management, and is now working very closely with Ngāti Whātua in terms of, if you haven't had a chance to go there, please do. Please have a look at the nursery that they've created in Pauriwa. It's fantastic to go and see what Ngāti Whātua themselves are doing in terms of employing their own people, making a difference to the environment. And I think that's a really big thing that we all need to be thinking about. And Jess is really at the forefront. When we talk about sustainability, that is what we need to be thinking about going forward. So if you could put your hands together for Jess.
So, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Jessica Tokuinga. As Hal said, I work for Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei. I'm not here today speaking on behalf of them, I'm speaking as myself, but a little bit of background for those of you that don't know me and wondering why I'm standing up here. My background is ecology, and then also sustainability and business management, and then also in terms of sustainable development. So really where I sit is helping people navigate this space and advising on how people can think about sustainability. So where this sort of kōrero today sits is just really opening a dialogue on how arborists can be more sustainable. And I don't really intend to stand up here and tell you guys how to do that, because ultimately you are the experts in your field and you'll have a lot more knowledge on how this can happen than I will. But because we're a really varied audience, and it is a workshop, so I'm going to ask questions, I thought we'd just get a feel for who we have in the room and sort of where you're sitting. So can I get a show of hands around who feels they have a good understanding of sustainability in general? Be honest, we're all friends. Like, okay, all right, so about half. Who has a sustainability policy or works for a company with a sustainability policy? All right, okay, a little bit less. And then who feels comfortable talking about sustainable practices, advocating for sustainable practices with their clients, with staff, and tenders, etc., etc. Okay, cool, all right. So I think we can skip over sustainability basics. Most people said that they know what they are. If you don't, come ask me afterwards. I can talk quite a lot to this. Where I think the key points really in sustainability sit are that a key aim of the sustainable future is where stuff like economic, social and technological progress occurs in harmony with nature. So there's a big need for this word balance. And for those of you who haven't seen it, this is the donut economics model, which is a really good way of thinking about this kind of concept of balance. And basically what that sort of talks to is that you have our planetary boundaries, which is this ecological foundation over here. If we use too many resources, we'll overshoot those planetary boundaries. If we don't use enough resources, then what we have is we have a shortfall in terms of social well-being. Within that social well-being is job security, is financial security. So economics does play a big part in this, and I know that's a concern for a lot of business owners and companies and individuals, and it does have to be. But this is kind of the big part of what I wanted to talk through today in terms of workshopping things. There's a role for everyone in sustainability in ARB, and I really thought that this is a good space for us to talk through where we see individuals, companies, NZARB and everyone sitting within sustainability. What actions they can take, what roles they can play, what things they can do. So for example, as an individual within an ARB company, within the industry, you can think about your waste reduction. You can think about what you're buying for lunch, whether you're using reusable coffee cups. You can think about your travel. How are you getting to work? Can you carpool? Can you meet on site? Is that closer? So these are the sorts of things. I set up a Google form with those questions on. You can scan the QR code if you want to be really techno and do that. Otherwise, can you guys just spend 5 minutes, turn to the person next to you and actually start having a conversation about this? Because ultimately, you signed up for a workshop, then this is going to be a workshop. So I'm not going to force you to move into groups. You're all adults, you can choose that. I'm not going to force you to talk to people if you don't want to. But here you have the option of doing it online by yourself or just talking in and around yourself. So have a think. Right, you're sitting by yourself. And you can do this. I'll just keep rambling until we all reach. Thank you. No one used the Google form, but that's all good. I just checked. But that means you all want to speak, so that's also really good. I've heard a lot of cool kōrero happening. Does anyone actually want to volunteer to share what they spoke of as a group? Because ultimately, to actually make any progress in sustainability, we need to be talking and sharing ideas and supporting each other. And this is kind of a really good safe space to start this dialogue. It's also a really good safe space to have people who are in ZARB listening here and you guys saying what you want from me. Also a really good opportunity to be pushing for companies to be acting here. So, anyone? Am I actually going to have to start? Oh, Margaret.
Yeah. Well, so my name is Margaret Boyce and I'm the environmental lead for Ōrākei Local Board. The big thing that we do about trees is we have a tree grant available for people who want to look after their trees, and we think it's a pretty good policy. We are surprised that no other local board has this. We are the only local board that does it, and we've been doing it for I think about 6 years or so, give or take. So that's what I would say, and obviously, you know, we consider that that's more sustainable than just chopping down trees and things like that. And the grant depends a little bit on the cost of, you know, getting the arborist to those trees. Generally, it's about half, by and large, and it's specifically for people for trees that are on private property.
That people find very struggling with funding and stuff.
Same
So the
thing.
people applying for the grant are struggling to fund the tree and stuff, so that's where you guys.
Okay, we'll move forward a little bit and see how we go. Some of the things that I brainstormed in this space are where everyone can act, and that's in terms of community engagement, education and awareness, and mātauranga Māori. So, for example, community engagement, we know NZR and Tree Council and things are both volunteer organisations. They are present in a lot of spaces, and there's a lot of opportunity for community engagement. This is the advocacy. This is getting to the people before they make the decision to remove the tree. So we talked a lot in the first two sessions in and around the need for legislation change and policy change, and that is absolutely vital, but that is a process that does take time. There's definitely steps that can happen in the lead up to that. Also, the more advocacy that happens, the more likely you are to get people who understand what it means to have tree protection and don't think that it is going to impact drastically on their rights. And that's where you have a really strong space to be in. In terms of mātauranga Māori, Rob's going to do really cool kōrero for you after this. But this is a wealth of knowledge for arborists. There's a lot of tohu, cultural indicators, that can talk to when to prune trees, when to do maintenance, also pest and diseases and things like that. So that is actually something that everyone should be really comfortable with and respectful of. From a really practical standpoint as well, we know that legislation is leading towards the need for engagement and the need for meaningful engagement. So as an organisation, you should be thinking about how you can engage with iwi, because moving forward it's going to be a requirement. Individually, the two that I talked about, did anyone have any other points that they think individuals can do in terms of art?
Water reduction.
That's a really good point, water reduction.
Yep, because we at home, we've started showering, collecting all our shower water. We started this when the water crisis kicked in. We just carried on doing it.
Yeah.
We managed to reduce our household water use from 200 litres per day down to 71, just by collecting all our shower water, washing up water and using that to flush the toilet. So we haven't flushed the toilet using the button for probably about a year and a half now. And so if it was easier for you to get grey water recycling put into your house, I mean, we have no infrastructure, we just have buckets in the shower that we stand in and then we use those to flush the toilet with. But if you had grey water recycling built into your house, you could cut water demand by half overnight, easily. You never need to develop any more water resources or build any more water treatment plants. You just reduce the demand.
And that's a really good point when you're thinking of sustainability. When we go back to the point about it needing to be about balance, this is a really key thing, is it has to be easily accessible and doable for people to actually want to have that impact. Okay, companies. I had a talk with some of the people at the back who said that they find it really hard as an individual to actually have any sustainable change because a lot of it's being driven by upper management. The decisions are being made, the decisions are sitting there. So where, as a company, you probably have a lot more impact is in which vehicles, tools and equipment you buy. However, as a staff member, there is definitely space for you to promote, advocate for and pitch the case for more sustainable equipment. When thinking about vehicles, tools and equipment, it's really important to recognise that this is not saying everyone needs to go out and replace their entire fleet with electric vehicles and that's the be all and end all. Sustainability is a process and is a journey, and so this is about setting those long-term intentions and moving towards those, and what that looks like for your industry and for your company is going to be different. But a really good way of doing that is setting sustainability strategies and setting that commitment. Making that a pledge, making that something that you as a company are putting out there. And a number of you did say that you had sustainability policies, but it was certainly a lot less than said they knew about sustainability. Another thing is supply chain management. you've got some very key sponsors, and there are a lot of things and arb supplies that are actually tailored for arborists. So you do have some really niche markets. Potentially this is something that you could be putting pressure back on those suppliers, thinking about the packaging, thinking about that supply chain. Are there ways of you making that more circular? Those kind of things. Another thing that companies can do is carbon footprint and data collection, which is, on my last page I've got some stuff about tools and things like that, but this is a really good way of showcasing. We saw from Howes how important data is to really build a case, especially in a business strategy where you want to know how should I be investing my money. Did anyone else come up with anywhere that they think companies could act?
You can have a paperless office, because my house is so small that I can't have tons of paper. So I just try and have absolutely everything that I possibly can have online.
Yeah.
So cancelling all the things that get sent to you automatically and just getting them on email and saving them on your hard drive rather than having all of those bits of paper, including your invoicing and that kind of thing. If you use MYOB, you can send the invoices electronically. You don't actually need to give people a piece of paper.
Yeah, so there are a lot of technological advances that are coming through in businesses nowadays, and again it's about working out through things like measuring your carbon footprint where you're having your biggest impact, and then it allows you to do some cost-benefit analysis around what are some easy wins, where are the big wins, what's going to take me longer to do, and those sorts of things. For NZR, what I kind of thought of is this national policy submission support. Really helping pull the industry together, work with the Tree Council, work with Forest and Bird. A lot of these organisations are doing a lot in this space with policy experts, and there's space for NZR to really tap into that.
Could I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
NZR, what's the penetration of NZR in Auckland and then in the rest of New Zealand?
Penetration, I think we've got just over 300 members. Yeah. We have the national conference, we have 4 regional tree climbing competitions, we've got the world men's and women's tree climbing champions at the moment, so we do, I guess, as much as we can within a volunteer organisation.
Okay.
But that membership, some of those are from like companies as well, so that's not total number.
So we might have, say, Treescape or Franklin Trees, for example, being members, but they might have 30, 40, 50 staff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And obviously your influence goes beyond, just
Another really key area of put in terms of collating information and providing resources. What this information and these resources are, I think that's up to you guys to really ask for and say where you want that support. Recognising again that NZR is a volunteer organisation, but then they can reach out to other organisations to support with that. But ultimately, it's about being vocal and really pushing for where you see these changes going. Is there anything else that, while we have Hal here from NZR, that you would like them to do in this space?
I think there's an issue which is almost invisible to people where we pollard or limb trees, which results in a very significant loss of carbon. And I know at one time when I was involved with the Tree Council, we convinced the council to stop pollarding the London plains. So it's just an example of how you think about that. And I know there's been a lot of discussion on the side here today about people saying, well, we're not going to remove that tree because morally it's wrong. And I think that leads a conversation towards how could you certify through New Zealand Art some sort of accredited arboriculture operator, and then make it clear to people that should be who you use, just as you wouldn't use an electrician who wasn't certified or anybody else. I mean, it's taking a leap outside of a simple one-liner, but I think, if we could actually see the amelioration of wholesale tree destruction, we do an enormous amount about retaining a carbon footprint, but also retaining a carbon sink, and preventing, even more importantly, a deterioration of the quality of our environment, which just doesn't affect simple things like carbon sink. It affects people's health, for God's sake. It affects a whole range of things, and there's a lot of work being done that demonstrate how a green leafy environment will in fact enhance people's quality of lives no end. And it always seems weird to me that the greenest, leafiest parts of our cities are where the wealthiest people live.
No coincidence. So I'm so glad you brought that up. There is definitely space within NZR to push for really strong things as we're waiting for policy to come in. There is nothing saying that NZR can't make a stand. There's nothing saying that as a company you can't make a stand and not do things. It's just figuring out how to do that in a strategic way. So, yeah, Freddie?
Oh no, did you finish?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, well, there's a
No,
lot more.
I think one of the things we did as a company when we wrote our sustainability policies is like food and food intake.
Yeah.
So we stay away a lot as a team, and we're really trying hard to sort of locally produced food, eating more vegetarian food. And the team was kind of really into that as well, and buying stuff that is, has like in the right season as well. So if onions and cabbage is in the season, that's what you kind of eat. If apples is in the season, that's what you eat. You don't buy oranges from America, for example. And trying to, give sort of local producers money instead of the American companies, for example.
And those kind of initiatives are really good because it sets a standard for all your staff, and then it starts that conversation happening. And then they go home, and then they go, oh wait, that's shipped in, because most of the supermarkets nowadays have where it's produced from. And I don't know if a lot of people look at that, but when you show them, then they do. And so that's where sustainability spreads beyond just arboriculture. Going back to education and awareness, in and around best practice, so pollarding versus not, habitat pruning, those sorts of things, there's a space here for arborists, and there really needs to be, in that advocacy, as was talked about earlier. But if there's gaps in that knowledge, or the people who are there, we can, as an organisation, there can be support to bring them forward, to get them into spaces where they can talk and do workshops. There just needs to be that call for that to happen, and that needs to come from you guys.
I'm just thinking whilst we're talking about this, because that whole certification idea, I know that NZR do have a certification process, but from what I've seen of it, it's an extremely high bar, and it's very expensive for companies to actually achieve that certification. So I'm wondering whether if as an industry, we can submit on this bill and saying that having some kind of certification process is a requirement for you to be able to work, provide advice, etc. In the context of the new legislation. Then it would force the industry to develop a certification process that was more achievable for companies, maybe a tiered one where you've got different levels, because a tiny company that's only got 2 people working for it, they've got very different requirements, if you like, in terms of what they would need to be certified for than someone like Treescape. It's a whole different ball game. So I think there needs to be a slightly different approach to certification, by which it is more realistic, more achievable, because then if you can certify the good guys who are doing the right thing, providing advice for all the rest of it, then organisations like mine, I get asked all the time by landowners who have got dead kauri trees, who do I get to come and remove these trees from me? And I find myself in a really difficult position of trying to recommend arborists that I know personally that are capable of going and doing that within the guidelines. But I find that a huge conflict of interest for me. I find it really difficult to do that. But if I could just point them at a website and say, these guys all of these companies have been certified because they've gone through some education about how to deal with carbon dioxide. That would be really useful to have that kind of facility, if you like, available for organisations, and I'm sure Hal gets it as well. So you can independently go, oh well, go and pick one of these, rather than depending on my personal opinion of who is a good or bad or indifferent arborist to go and do that work for you.
Hal, does NZARB have any input into the training that goes on? So through...
Yes, very much so. So we have just recently gone through a whole review process, and so we sit on a panel with primary ITO and followed other industry people, and one of the key things that NZARB pushed in that panel was actually having sustainability for trees built into the qualification, so that basically there's a section in the qualification that educates the arborists about specifically why to retain the tree and keep it rather than remove it. So that's something that we're quite adamant about, and that is getting sewn now into the qualification framework. So it's not a silver bullet, but it's just a good start towards having the right people with the right advice when it comes to that first inquiry from the landowner. Yeah, so we definitely have involvement with that, but we don't have we can't dictate, we can only suggest. So
No, and this is where this kind of education, awareness, community engagement space is so important, because you do have the opportunity to influence things such as industry training standards and stuff.
we're doing a lot on the certification side of things as well, and looking at our whole audit-approved contractors program. So we've actually tabled changing that more in the direction of sustainability rather than health and safety, because there's lots of other programs in health and safety. So at the moment we're just working on how we can actually make the sustainability certification and it being viable for businesses that want to do it. So it'll be about clients actually acquiring it, and we're doing some marketing around that as well to actually get the public more aware of what to ask for and get an arborist, and hopefully that will slowly but surely have an effect.
Awesome.
Wouldn't it be great though, if the legislation required a developer to seek advice from a certified arborist?
From a qualified arborist, yeah.
Or insurance companies.
Yeah. Does anyone else have anything to add in this space? I think we've got some really good feedback and stuff.
Just the education side of thing and awareness, that we're all in the industry, we know all this, but our biggest, we need to somehow project that to people who aren't, people who don't understand. Something Hal mentioned earlier with the issues inside Auckland, but I don't know whether NZR can do a video series about trees are good for a lot of work put into it, but it would be really good to actually put something out there that here are the benefits of trees, here why we want them, and this is what you can do to help.
We've got a lot of work done on that.
Sorry? It's in the pipeline, literally from us, but we've only got so much space for the budget.
I understand that.
We're going to go for advertising and radio and possibly some YouTube stuff, but we're just getting prices back and trying to figure out how far we can stretch out 20 grand, whatever it is.
And don't forget there's opportunities for partnership in that space as well in terms of funding. So I think there's also that, is figuring out how NZARB can align themselves with other organisations, because there are multiple people that do care about trees and care about the environment, and we don't want to be operating in silos.
Wasn't there an article in the last Tree Matters on the value of trees and the ecosystem services provided by trees?
The last year, maybe the one before that.
The one before that, which was quite comprehensive with a lot of research behind it.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff really helps for you guys to learn how you can then speak to your clients and take on some of that knowledge and some of the language and stuff and translate between that, because that's a really important thing, is people out in the general public may not have access to the Tree Matters magazine, and you're that bridge between it. I'm very aware of time and totally eating up into Rob's space, but I think I'll just skip through this stuff, because if you want to know more about sustainability policies, sort of the purpose of them, what they could look like, come and have a chat with me afterwards. There's also a bunch of tools and indicators that you can use, which is really good for collecting data and things like that. Some of them cost, some of them are free. There's also some online calculators on Tane's Trees Trust that does native offsetting and trees that count as well, which is really good. So yeah, I think just being very wary of time and the level of knowledge we have in the room. But yeah, if you want to know more about this, come and talk to me afterwards. Guys, thank you.